Hello everyone! Today I'm going to be taking a look at Orgoglio e Pregiudizio, the 1957 Italian adaptation of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, scripted by Edoardo Anton. This was a 5-part miniseries that aired on television. Episodes have been posted on YouTube by the channel Darsified, who kindly added subtitles for those of us who don't speak Italian. The subs aren't perfect, and the video quality is kinda wobbly sometimes, but it's better than nothing. Verna Lisi plays Elizabeth Bennet, and Franco Volpi plays Mr. Darcy. I don't know him from anything, but I have seen her before in The Black Tulip, a 1964 swashbuckler where she has a playful sword fight with Alain Delon. Speaking of sword fights, that's how this adaptation begins. It's very unusual. With no context, we're left to guess who the principals are and why they're fighting. If you assume it's Darcy and Wickham, you are correct, but you have to wait a while to get confirmation. So we're only a minute in, and already we have a Pride and Prejudice first. That's a promising beginning. The Bennet family has only 4 daughters in this version. Elizabeth has been elevated from second-born to first-born. Jane is called Jenny. Lydia is a little older than usual. She's 18 by the end of the story. And they took Mary's name and gave it to Kitty. There really is no Mary Bennet here. The sister called Mary is Lydia's buddy. They're both always on the prowl for officers. So, except for a couple scenes where she plays the piano, Mary is Kitty. We are introduced to the Bennets and Charlotte Lucas as they chaotically prepare not for the Meryton Assembly, but the Netherfield Ball. I don't get why they made this change, but we already had some warning with the sword fight and the family downsizing that this version takes some liberties. Sometimes, often, the plot and dialogue are faithfully lifted from the book. But other times, it's like, what are we doing? For purists, this may be frustrating. But I will say that starting with the sword fight did help me adjust my expectations. So, even as I struggled to make sense of some changes, I was able to enjoy the surprise twists they put on this very familiar narrative. We meet our hero officially when a dancing captain bumps into a waiter who crashes into Mr. Darcy. And then, because he's just standing around talking to Sir William, Mrs. Bennet decides to go over and introduce herself. It's all playing out a bit differently, a bit wrong, you might say, but Darcy does insult Elizabeth. We're back on track, calling her acceptable, according to the subtitles. It sounds like he says passable, and she's genuinely upset, not just laughing it off as she normally would. A bit later, at the same ball, he does ask her to dance, and she rejects him using the same word, which is cheeky of her, and then she makes eyes at him while dancing with someone else. That's kinda strange. We cut away to a mysterious stranger who turns out to be Wickham, and he is the guy from the opening duel. You can tell because he now has a scar on his cheek from where Darcy's blade scratched him. It is very odd to have Wickham show up so early in the story, but once I had seen the whole thing, I realized that this adaptation places a lot of emphasis on the Darcy versus Wickham conflict. More emphasis than usual. Wickham has come to Bingley looking for money. He tells a sob story and samples the booze. Bingley is patient as his friend is being vilified, and here they reveals that they have changed Darcy's first name to David. At no point did I get used to that. I like this portrayal of Bingley. He's got a sweet temper, but he is also intelligent, and while he acquiesces to Wickham's request, he is guarded. When Jane goes to visit Netherfield in the rain, Lizzie comes rushing after her with an umbrella, too little too late, and they end up arriving together. Lizzie tries to leave, but it's Darcy who urges her to stay. She teases him with that word again, and later she messes with him while he chooses a book for her from the library, and as Caroline Bingley, called Carol here, plays the piano, he does ask Lizzie if she would like to dance, which is in the book, but seldom makes the cut. The Bennet family braces for Mr. Collins' visit, and I'm really tickled by this Mrs. Bennet. She's so animated, and the dynamic between her and her husband is a little different from the norm. They squabble, she gets all riled up, he shoots some zingers. But while she talks a lot about her nerves, she is a tough lady, and I enjoy the quirky rapport they have in this version. As for this Mr. Collins, he's not hilarious, but he is fun. I think he's the first I've seen who openly evaluates his future property, and because he's only staying 3 days, he speedruns his wife quest, proposing to Elizabeth the very day of his arrival, despite only seeing her for about 5 minutes. In town, she, Lydia, and Mary meet Wickham, who instantly singles her out. They witness his frigid interaction with Darcy, and Lydia actually has a front row seat when Darcy snubs Wickham's offer of a handshake. Lizzie laps up his sob story with a spoon, even though in this version it's very obvious to the audience that he's full of baloney. What should be the Netherfield Ball is now a party at Longbourn hosted by the Bennets. I don't know why they made this minor change, or countless others, but the usual mortifications occur. Lizzie and Darcy do not dance, which is lame. He does ask her, but she says she would rather not, so they just talk instead. It's not the same! And I must say, he shows a lot of patience with her. Every word she says is an assault on his character, and he just takes it. Another striking thing is how enthusiastically Charlotte Lucas encourages Mr. Collins. Lizzie introduces them to each other as a joke, but the way Charlotte flirts and lets him chase her around the party actually makes it seem like she's into him. Or very, very desperate, which, yes, she is, but they don't, at least in what I saw, they don't emphasize that here. So, if she's faking her interest, boy is she laying it on thick. After the party, Darcy has a heavy talk with Bingley about Jane, convincing him that it's best they leave for London as soon as possible. Bingley, who's really a sweetheart in this version, takes a lot of persuading, and Darcy seems to feel kind of bad about the whole thing. Incidentally, he almost admits to his own secret attachment. And then, who should he find loitering in the bushes but Wickham? They have a long, bitter dialogue where Wickham gets surprisingly poetic. The scene doesn't really move the story forward, but it does add drama. Jane and Lizzie find out that Bingley's left, leaving Jane heartbroken, and then Charlotte marries Mr. Collins. That was fast. Wickham puts the moves on Elizabeth, and his amorous persistence puzzled me until it's revealed that Wickham had made a bet with Colonel Forster that he could win, seduce, whatever, Miss Bennet. That's not in the book. Back with the Bingleys, Caroline intercepts a letter for her brother from Jane. She asks Darcy what to do with it, and he shrugs off the responsibility, but also keeps mum as she burns the letter and lies about it. Darcy's cousin, Colonel Fitzwilliam, is there, and Darcy admits he doesn't like doing this cloak and dagger stuff, but he says it's for a good cause. So they decided to show us the scene the Colonel is referring to later when he tells Lizzie that Darcy has recently prevented his friend from making an imprudent match. As Elizabeth arrives for her visit with the Collinses at Hunsford, Colonel Fitzwilliam arrives and has a chat with Lady Catherine. She's a real sourpuss. She refers to Collins as an imbecile and makes sure Darcy hasn't gotten attached to any young ladies who would blow up her plans. Her daughter Anne plays some music for the guests, and Lady Catherine has a little fit because Lizzie isn't properly enraptured, Mr. Collins sneezes, and he and his wife clap too early. I do think Lizzie is kind of rude here. I cringed at some of her impudent responses. Not that Lady Catherine doesn't deserve it, but still. Poor Anne asks to be excused, but Lady Catherine insists she stay until Darcy arrives, which makes me wonder if Anne was trying to get out of seeing him. It's an intriguing idea, not the first time I've wondered if maybe Anne is as repelled by the idea of marrying him as he is by the idea of marrying her. Lizzie and the Colonel get along swimmingly, and then they encounter Darcy, David, in the park. He's perfectly pleasant to Elizabeth, and in turn, she bats him around. Until they're left alone together, and then she gets all moony and weird, and I had some trouble interpreting just how she feels about him. Is she uncomfortable? Is she confused, wary, attracted? I can't tell. Then a couple paragraphs at the end of the episode pop up, explaining that Darcy proposes, Lizzie refuses him, and he defends himself against her accusations in a letter. I cannot understand why such a major scene, and its follow-up, would not be shown. I get cutting things for time, but this is crucial to Pride and Prejudice. Now, I could be mistaken, and these scenes were filmed, but then they were lost. But the way these paragraphs are presented makes me think that that's not the case, that they just didn't film them. Episode 4 starts with Elizabeth leaving Hunsford, depressed now because she realizes she's had it all wrong. When she gets home, Wickham is back at it, but this time she has even more reason to keep her distance. And even Lydia notices. Here's where things get really strange. Elizabeth and Jane are walking past Netherfield and notice activity inside. From the housekeeper, they learn that Darcy and his sister have arrived. Cut to Longbourn, where the Darcys are sitting with Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. Awkward pauses abound. You can assume from this that they have cut Lizzie's visit to Pemberley and had Darcy pop up at her house instead. Which is such a weird change, but it does make for a funny scene. Mrs. Bennet is super awkward with Darcy. She does not know what to do with him, especially when he gallantly says, "We're not going to deprive ourselves of your company anytime soon, Mrs. Bennet," which could be delivered sarcastically or as a threat, but no, he's being sincere, or at least he's being very polite, and sincere in that politeness. This is the new Mr. Darcy. He's on a mission to show that he's a good guy, he's a gentleman, he's not what they all think of him. And it's weird. When Lizzie and Jane burst in the room, he jumps up and they just stare at each other until he says fervently, "Miss Bennet, what a pleasure to see you again." It does not have the same punch as other versions of their reunion, but it is interesting. And honestly, the way that this whole scene plays out reminds me more of the chapter that comes much later in the book, almost at the end, when Bingley and Darcy have returned to Netherfield and they attend the party at Longbourn. Lizzie is in agony because she wants to talk to him, but all they can do is exchange pleasantries over their teacups. This scene has a similar vibe, where they're making a valiant effort to be chill and act normal, but she is just totally distracted, and in this case she's frazzled because of how things were the last time they met. Darcy convinces Mr. Bennet that he should give fishing a try, and then everyone looks on as Darcy follows Elizabeth around the room, and I'm sure they're all wondering, what are they talking about? And then there's a party at Netherfield where they play a musical game. Bingley plays the piano and Darcy joins in, and then Elizabeth takes Bingley's place and everyone else is clapping along. It's like a hectic parlor game. They refer to the fact that it's all the rage in London right now, and it's a cute little scene, though I don't know what Jane Austen would have thought of the fact that Darcy and Lizzie are all smiles now. As she and Darcy wander about, Lizzie keeps getting this faraway, self-conscious look, and I feel like, okay, people, just kiss already, let's wrap this up. But I know Lydia still has to elope, and sure enough, she does, and that breaks up the party. I think that Darcy wanted to embrace Lizzie before she left to assure her that the news doesn't make any difference to him where she's concerned, but she's all, no, this is goodbye. One of the biggest surprises in this adaptation is how much it delves into the details of Darcy's confrontation with Wickham. The meeting itself is not covered in the book, and most adaptations show very little, if they show it at all. So it's interesting to see what they did here, and how much of episode 4 is devoted to it. It is a tense sequence. Darcy, who's no card player, gambles with Wickham for information about Lydia's whereabouts, and when Wickham says something ugly and dishonorable, Darcy gets rough, which I found rather satisfying. There's something kind of pathetic about how it all turns out, though. I felt a lot of different emotions watching this sequence. Wickham breaks down, Darcy recognizes unflattering parallels between them. Wickham goes back to Lydia, and she is confused, alarmed, defiant. Wickham, who is played by Enrico Maria Salerno, has a couple monologues in this episode, and he offers a fresh take on the character. The Bennets have Mr. and Mrs. Wickham over for dinner. Lydia is insufferable, and Mr. Bennet keeps making sarcastic side comments. Lizzie corners Mrs. Gardner and makes her spill the beans about Darcy's involvement, and she says some interesting things. The scene where Bingley proposes to Jane is really funny. I think it's the funniest scene in the whole miniseries, primarily because of Mrs. Bennet and the way she's herding everybody, not just out of the room, but out of the house. Darcy is there, and she practically drags him into the garden. She's on the verge of whacking everyone with her fan, including Jane, who doesn't get it and tries to ask Lizzie something, and Mrs. Bennet is like, "What are you doing? I'm clearing the room for you!" Something about Mrs. Bennet's delivery here reminded me of Yzma from The Emperor's New Groove. Darcy's second proposal happens in sections, I guess because Elizabeth keeps pushing him away. She doesn't want him to debase himself by becoming Wickham's relative. So he tells her about Wickham almost seducing his sister, which he apparently did not say in his letter. The sisters and their beaux drop in on a peasant dance, which felt really out of place to me, and it goes on for way too long. Darcy continues to press his suit with Elizabeth, while Jane and Bingley have one of those cute but kind of insipid, "When did you first love me? Why do you love me?" conversations, which they never have in other versions. Once they get engaged, it's boring. Nobody cares. Then Collins shows up at the house to announce Lady Catherine's arrival, and Mrs. Bennet practically prostrates herself. I really like this confrontation between Lizzie and Lady Catherine. Lizzie is fiery, but dignified. The only downside is that Lady Catherine doesn't say her best line. "Are the shades of Pemberley to be thus polluted?" That's the one line I was most looking forward to, and she never says it. What? I want my money back. But it is funny when their argument is interrupted by an outburst from Mrs. Bennet, who throws Collins out of the house. And then it turns out Darcy was in the carriage too. Isn't that also in the 1940 version, that he's waiting outside to see how Lady Catherine is received? Here, when Lady Catherine basically disowns him, he says, "I'm sorry, Aunt, but now my family will be the one Elizabeth gives me." I'm not sure if he's referring to her immediate family and extended relations, or if he's talking about her and their prospective children. You could take it either way. You could take it both ways. And then he goes to Lizzie, and she's eagerly reaching for him, and they embrace and kiss, and finally I'm feeling the romance. Cut to Mr. Bennet in his study, who wants to ask Lizzie about something, so he goes over to the window and starts to call her, and he sees them. His reaction's great. He's like, "Oh, excuse me. I thought she disliked him." And when she reveals the truth of what Darcy's done for the family, he's like, "Oh, thank goodness. I thought it was your uncle, and I was going to have to repay him. This way, I'll try to repay Darcy, and he'll give me a big speech about love, and insist that I forget about it." Whew. Weddings happen, and the newlyweds are stopped on the road out of town by Mr. Collins, who gives a long speech apologizing for his absence and kissing up to them, maybe because he's done the math and realized that they can offer him more than Lady Catherine. And the adaptation closes with a surprisingly sweet and tender moment between Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. It doesn't start that way. She's driving him crazy with her lamentations and complaints, but when she slips into the garden to cry, he notices and comforts her. It's a nice final touch. Overall, I got a kick out of this adaptation. Obviously, if you've never seen a Pride and Prejudice before, this is not the place to start. I would not recommend this for you. But in and of itself, I don't think it's awful. And I would say that it's worth checking out, especially if you are a person who loves Pride and Prejudice and you watch all the adaptations. And if you're familiar with the book, then you can appreciate how faithful it is when it's faithful. And you can have a laugh over its more outlandish and creative deviations. I've put a link to the full episodes of Orgoglio e pregiudizio in the description. Boy, am I glad that I only had to say that twice. It's a mouthful. I hope you enjoyed this review, and I will be back next Saturday with another. Thanks for watching.